You get the promotion, you get the good news, you get the compliment you've been quietly hoping for. And instead of feeling proud, something strange happens. A voice in your head says this was luck, someone made a mistake. Sooner or later, they're going to find out you're not as good as they think. If that voice sounds familiar, you're not broken, and you're not alone. Nearly 70% of people experience this at some point. But here's the part almost nobody tells you. This isn't really about confidence. It's about a story your mind built years ago, and it's still running in the background of everything you do. Think about the last time you doubted yourself. Maybe it was at work. Maybe it was in a relationship. Maybe it was just deciding what to say in a group chat. In that moment, it probably felt personal, like a flaw specific to you. But psychologists have a name for this pattern, and it's more structured than most people realize. Researchers Clance and Ims were the first to describe it back in 1978. They called it imposter syndrome, an internal conviction that you're a fraud, even when the evidence says otherwise. Here's what makes it so convincing. It doesn't show up as one big feeling. It shows up as 5 small habits. You give credit for your success to luck instead of skill. You live with a quiet dread of being exposed. You downplay your own intelligence, even when other people clearly respect it. You take small feedback and treat it like proof you're failing, and you over-prepare for everything, just to protect yourself from a failure that probably was never coming. None of these look dramatic from the outside. That's exactly why they're so easy to miss in yourself. But here's where it gets interesting. This pattern doesn't start in adulthood. It starts much earlier, and it starts somewhere you'd never expect. Researchers Shen and colleagues followed people over time and found something surprising. Self-esteem in childhood predicts how securely people attach to others as adults, and that attachment style predicts how much psychological distress they carry later in life. In other words, the doubt you feel at 30 might trace back to a feeling you had at 7. Psychologist John Bowlby called this the internal working model. As children, we build 2 mental blueprints. One about other people. Are they reliable? Will they show up for me? And one about ourselves. Am I worthy of love and help, or do I have to earn it every single time? If that second blueprint gets built on shaky ground, it doesn't just disappear when you grow up. It quietly becomes the lens you see every achievement through. What most people don't realize is that this idea isn't new. Long before modern psychology had a name for it, other thinkers were circling the same truth. Alfred Adler believed every child starts out feeling small and powerless and spends their life compensating for it, usually in healthy ways. But when that compensation goes too far, it hardens into what he called an inferiority complex, a permanent sense of not being enough. Karen Horney took it further. She said people under enough insecurity build an idealized version of themselves, a perfect, impressive self they feel pressured to become. The problem is, the real version of you can never live up to that fantasy. So you start seeing your actual self with something close to contempt. Horney noticed people cope with this in 3 ways. Some move toward others, chasing approval. Some move against others, chasing control. And some move away entirely, avoiding closeness so no one gets close enough to see the cracks. Carl Jung looked at this same struggle from another angle. He talked about the tension between the persona, the mask we show the world, and the shadow, the parts of ourselves we push down and refuse to look at. Most people spend their whole lives polishing the mask while the shadow quietly grows heavier. Jung believed the way out wasn't to destroy the mask or the shadow, but to integrate them. To stop treating the doubting, imperfect parts of yourself as something to hide and start treating them as something to understand. This changes everything once you see it clearly. Self-doubt isn't random, it has a shape, and in 2024, researcher Valerie Young mapped out 5 distinct versions of it. The perfectionist, who feels shame over a single small mistake. The expert, who feels shame the moment there's a gap in their knowledge. The soloist, who feels shame just for asking for help. The natural genius, who feels shame if success requires real effort. And the superhuman, who feels shame the instant they fall short in any one area of life, even while succeeding everywhere else. Most people recognize themselves in at least one of these before the sentence is even finished. Here's the part that catches people off guard. The instinct to fix this is usually to work harder, prepare more, achieve more, prove the doubt wrong with results. But that strategy backfires. Psychologists call it the overcompensation trap. The harder you work to silence the doubt, the more evidence you create that you can only succeed through relentless effort, which quietly confirms the exact fear you were trying to escape. You are not naturally enough. You just outworked the lie one more time. This shows up even in people who seem to have it together on paper. University of Michigan researchers found that half of all mothers and over a third of fathers regularly doubt their competence as parents. Among people already seeing a psychologist, that number jumps to 75%, which tells you something important. This isn't a performance problem. It's not fixed by being better at your job, or your marriage, or your parenting. The doubt follows competence around like a shadow, because it was never really about competence in the first place. Researcher Simon Sherry found that this kind of doubt is usually fed by one of three types of perfectionism. Sometimes you're demanding flawlessness from yourself. Sometimes you're demanding it from the people around you without even realizing it. And sometimes it's not coming from you at all. It's the belief that society, or your boss, or some invisible expert somewhere expects perfection from you. Once you can name which one you're carrying, it stops feeling like a personality trait and starts looking like a pattern you can actually interrupt. There's another layer underneath all of this, and it's a stranger one. For some people, doubt stops attaching to real situations altogether. It starts attaching to impossible ones. What if I secretly want to hurt someone I love? What if I'm not who I think I am at all? These thoughts feel enormous, but they're not based on anything real. Psychologists describe this with a simple image. Imagine looking for a ring at the bottom of a pond. The more you stir the water trying to find it, the more sand you kick up, and the less you can see. The doubt doesn't get solved by searching harder. It settles on its own the moment you stop stirring. So where does that leave you? Not with a fix, but with a reframe. Pediatrician and psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott spent years studying parents who were terrified of failing their children. His conclusion surprised people. Children don't need a perfect parent. They need a good enough one. Someone present, someone trying, someone who fails sometimes in small, ordinary ways. Because those small failures are exactly what teach a child how to handle a world that isn't perfect either. The same idea applies to you, not the version of you that never messes up, the version that's simply good enough, showing up, trying, adjusting as you go. One practical tool psychologists use is called cognitive diffusion. Instead of saying, "I am a fraud," you say, "I am having the thought that I am a fraud." That one shift creates distance between you and the story. The thought is still there, but you're no longer fused to it. Psychologist Kristen Neff adds one more piece to this. She calls it self-compassion, and it has three parts. Speaking to yourself the way you'd speak to a friend, instead of a critic. Remembering that struggling with doubt is something almost every person carries, not a private flaw unique to you, and simply noticing the feeling without spiraling further into it. None of these require you to become someone else. They just ask you to stop treating yourself like the exception to basic human kindness. Self-doubt was never proof that you're failing. It was proof that somewhere along the way, you learned to expect the worst about yourself before anyone else had the chance to. That belief was built, which means it can be rebuilt, not into false confidence, but into something quieter and more durable. The simple, repeated understanding that good enough was always enough. If this explained something about the voice in your head, you already know someone who needs to hear it too.